My name is Alex, and I'm here to recount the chilling tale of my experience at St. Jude's Hospital, an ordeal that will haunt me until my last breath. It all began when I received a late-night call from my brother, Mark. He sounded frantic and disoriented, telling me he was in St. Jude's Hospital and that he needed my help. Concerned, I rushed to the hospital without hesitation. St. Jude's was an imposing structure, its facade shrouded in shadows even in broad daylight. As I entered, a pervasive sense of unease washed over me. The hospital corridors seemed to stretch into infinity, and the flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows. I approached the front desk and inquired about Mark's location. The nurse on duty glanced at me with cold, emotionless eyes and directed me to the basement of all places. A chill ran down my spine as I descended the dimly lit stairs. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow, winding hallways, each one darker and more oppressive than the last. The air grew heavy with the stench of antiseptic and decay. The walls seemed to close in on me, and I could hear faint whispers echoing through the shadows. I finally reached the end of a corridor and entered a small, dimly lit room. Mark was lying on a narrow hospital bed, his face pallid and his eyes filled with terror. He mumbled incoherently, his gaze fixed on something unseen in the room. "Mark, it's me, Alex," I said, rushing to his side, but he didn't respond, as though he couldn't hear me. It was as if he had been consumed by a profound fear that had robbed him of his senses. I tried to pull back the thin curtain that separated Mark's bed from the bed next to his, hoping to find someone who could explain what was happening. But there was no one there, only an empty bed shrouded in darkness. As I turned back to Mark, I noticed that the room had grown even colder. The whispers in the shadows had intensified, and I could now make out faint, mournful cries. My heart raced, and a feeling of dread settled over me. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble glow to navigate the room. The whispers had become louder, and I could hear Mark's voice among them, pleading for help. I tried to shake him awake, but he remained unresponsive. Panic welled up inside me as I realized that something malevolent lurked in the darkness. I had to get Mark out of there, no matter the cost. With my phone as my only source of light, I dragged Mark's limp body out of the room and into the corridor. The whispers seemed to follow us, growing louder and more insistent. I stumbled through the labyrinthine hallways, desperately searching for an exit. But no matter which direction I turned, I couldn't find my way. Out of that nightmarish maze, the walls seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, trapping me in their grasp. I felt as though I had become a prisoner in this haunted hospital. As I continued to struggle, a pale figure materialized in the darkness ahead. It was the nurse from the front desk, her eyes now glowing with an unnatural light. She beckoned to me with a skeletal hand, her voice a chilling whisper. "Join us," she hissed. I recoiled in horror, realizing that the hospital itself was possessed by malevolent spirits, and they hungered for more souls. I clung to Mark, determined to protect him from whatever sinister force sought to claim him. In the distance, I saw a faint glimmer of light, a flicker of hope. I followed it through the shifting corridors, the whispers growing more desperate as I drew nearer to the source of the light. Finally, I burst through a set of double doors and found myself in the hospital's lobby, bathed in the welcoming glow of the moonlight. Mark began to stir, his senses returning to him. We stumbled out of St. Jude's Hospital, leaving behind the nightmarish labyrinth of darkness and despair. To this day, Mark and I are haunted by the memory of that dreadful night in the hospital, the sinister whispers, and the malevolent force that dwells within its walls. St. Jude's Hospital remains abandoned, a place of unspeakable horror that we can never forget. It was the night that still sends shivers down my spine. The night I will never forget. I was working the night shift at Mercywood Hospital, a place where the sick came for healing and where, unbeknownst to most, something sinister lurked in the shadows. My name is Sarah, and I was a nurse at Mercywood. The hospital had a reputation for its eerie past, but I never took those stories seriously until that fateful night. The air was heavy with the scent of antiseptic as I went about my duties, checking on the patients in the dimly lit corridors. One particular patient, Mr. Harrison, had been admitted with severe injuries from a car accident. His face was heavily bandaged, and he communicated through painful groans and gestures. My heart ached for him, and I did my best to provide comfort. As the clock struck midnight, an unsettling feeling washed over me. The hospital seemed different, as though it had transformed into a place of malevolence. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to exhaustion. Then, Mr. Harrison began acting strangely. His groans grew louder and more frantic, and he pointed insistently at the window, his eyes filled with terror. I glanced out, but there was nothing there. Just the empty darkness of the night, I reassured him. But his agitation only intensified. He managed to scribble something on a piece of paper he kept by his bedside. I read the words, written in shaky handwriting. They watched before I could ask him for clarification. The lights in the room flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. My heart raised as I fumbled for my flashlight, casting a feeble beam of light on the room. Mr. Harrison's groans turned into terrified screams, and I could hear other patients in nearby rooms crying out in fear. I rushed to his bedside, but he had fallen silent. The room felt oppressively cold, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. That's when I saw them, shadowy figures lurking at the edges of the room. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and they seemed to be whispering to one another in a language I couldn't understand. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the call button to summon help, I heard a voice, a chilling, disembodied voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. "You should not be here," it whispered, sending shivers down my spine. In a panic, I fled the room and rushed into the corridor, where I encountered chaos. Patients were screaming, nurses were running in all directions, and the lights continued to flicker ominously. I tried to find my way to the nurses' station, but the hospital's layout had become a nightmarish maze. The ST walls seemed to shift and change, leading me further into the labyrinth of darkness. Finally, I stumbled upon the nurses' station, where I found my colleague, Lisa, trembling in fear. She had seen the same shadowy figures and heard the eerie whispers. We huddled together, desperately trying to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around us. As the night wore on, we discovered that the hospital was not what it seemed. The spirits of the departed patients, unable to find peace, roamed the corridors, seeking revenge for the suffering they had endured. They whispered of the hospital's dark history, of experiments gone wrong, and of the malevolent force that had taken hold of Mercywood. Desperation pushed Lisa and me to find a way out of the hospital. We knew we had to confront the sinister presence that held it captive. Armed with our flashlights and a newfound determination, we ventured deeper into the haunted hospital, guided by the whispers of the tormented souls. In the hospital's bowels, we discovered an abandoned research wing, its doors sealed shut for years. We forced our way inside, finding a room filled with ancient medical equipment and cryptic symbols etched on the walls. In the center of the room, a glowing portal pulsed with an eerie light. The whispers grew louder, urging us to step through, promising answers to our questions. We hesitated, knowing that this was the point of no return. With a deep breath, we stepped into the portal, our world disintegrating into blinding light. We found ourselves in a realm of shadowy figures and tortured souls, the hospital's dark history laid bare, before us. The malevolent force that had plagued Mercy would have been feeding on the suffering of its patients for years. It hungered for more souls to add to its collection. Lisa and I faced a choice: to join the tormented spirits or to confront the entity and put an end to its reign of terror. Summoning every ounce of courage, we confronted the malevolent force, our determination a stark contrast to the despair that had fueled it for so long, demanded it release the souls it had trapped and leave Mercywood forever. In a deafening cacophony of screams and whispers, the entity lashed out, but we stood our ground. Slowly, it began to weaken, its grip on the hospital and the tormented souls loosening. As the first light of dawn broke through the windows of Mercywood, the malevolent force let out a final agonized scream and dissipated into the ether. The hospital was no longer haunted, and the tormented spirits found peace at last. Lisa and I emerged from the ordeal, forever changed by our harrowing experience. Mercywood Hospital was abandoned and condemned, its dark secrets buried beneath the rubble. But the memory of that night, of the shadowy figures and the haunting whispers, still lingers in our minds, a reminder that there are places in this world where darkness and despair can take hold, and where courage and determination are the only weapons against the unknown. The moon hung low in the inky black sky, casting eerie shadows across the decaying facade of the Byberry Mental Hospital. Its ominous silhouette stood as a grim reminder of the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. I had heard the stories, the chilling accounts of the suffering and neglect that had plagued this forsaken place. I had come to investigate, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my unwavering curiosity. As I cautiously stepped through the shattered entrance, a bone-chilling breeze seemed to welcome me. The hospital's once sterile white walls were now smudged with time and decay. Broken glass crunching beneath my feet echoed through the dimly lit corridor. It was easy to imagine the torment that had once filled these halls. Byberry had been infamous for its overcrowded and poorly managed conditions. Patients, already struggling with their mental health, were subjected to further suffering. It was a house of nightmares, where the line between compassion and negligence had blurred. I moved deeper into the darkness, my flashlight flickering erratically, as if it were trying to resist revealing the grim reality that lay ahead. As I ventured down a corridor, I heard faint sounds, the echoes of distant conversations that had once taken place in these forsaken halls. These were not ghostly whispers, but rather the lingering echoes of past pain and suffering. My heart raced and my palms grew clammy. I knew I was not alone in this forsaken place. The flickering light led me to a room where a rusted iron bed frame stood in the center. The mattress was tattered, and the room bore the scars of its former inhabitants. As I scanned the room, the temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath hanging in the frigid air. And then, in the corner of the room, I noticed a tall, human-like figure. It stood, motionless, its presence imposing and unsettling. Its silhouette was distorted, and its eyes, if it had any, were shrouded in darkness. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure remained unmoving, its gaze fixed on me. With each passing moment, the sense of dread in the room deepened. The room seemed to sigh, as if bearing witness to the weight of its history. Suddenly, the atmosphere grew even colder, and the walls appeared to close in, suffocating me with the palpable sense of despair. Desperate to escape, I turned and fled. the room's haunted history clinging to me like a heavy shroud. The memories of the suffering and neglect that had transpired in this place were overwhelming. As I stumbled out of the hospital, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of sadness. Byberry Mental Hospital had exacted its toll on me, a toll I would carry for the rest of my days. The haunting echoes of its past had reached out to me, their pain and anguish forever etched into my memory. Byberry was a place of real horror, where the living had endured unimaginable hardships, and the legacy of that suffering would persist long after the doors had closed for the last time.